Hello, and welcome to the Keyword Compendium. Here we discuss the many keywords of magic, how they work, and what they work best with. I'm your host, Paul. Let's begin. Today we will be covering Surveil, a rather recent mechanic, but one beloved nonetheless. So, what is Surveil? According to the English dictionary, surveil is to keep under surveillance, or keep something under surveillance. Okay, cool. So what does it do? Well, Surveil lets you look at the top N cards of your library and lets you decide what of them you want to put in the graveyard and what you want to keep on top of your library. Use N in this situation to represent any number. So we now see how it works and what kind of flavor it's supposed to represent. It is a Demir mechanic, so keeping stuff under surveillance kind of makes sense. But what does it interact best with? Well, thanks to working with the graveyard, Surveil has lots of stuff you can use in conjunction with it. From the newly keyworded mill to the graveyard boosted undergrowth, Surveil really covers a lot of ground. I mean, just look at all of those abilities. And even better, because it works with the top of your library at that same time, you can use any kind of stuff that manipulates the top of your deck. Stuff like Brainstorm, Preordain, a whole bunch of cards. But rather than just go on, let me give you a couple more solid examples so you can kind of see what I mean. So, let's take a look at Sinister Sabotage. Let's say you decide to throw that in a control deck. You just countered someone else's spell, and now you get to Surveil. You look at the top of your library, and you could see any of the following cards. Well, depending on what cards you see, you have a plethora of options. Say you see Life from the Loam. Well, if you so want to, you could throw Life from the Loam into your graveyard, and at the next turn, dredge 3. Just fill your graveyard up even more, get Life from the Loam into your hand, go nuts. Or, maybe you see Faithless Looting. You could keep it on top and cast it if you so want, but maybe your hand is pretty well set at that moment and you just kind of don't want to. Well, go ahead and pitch it to your graveyard. It's got flashback, so you can cast it later. Or maybe you spotted Honored Hydra on top. Instead of keeping it on top and hard casting it at 6, why not pitch it into your graveyard? Embalming it for 4 means that you're getting back a 6/6 trampler ahead of curve, which is pretty good. Or maybe you see one of my personal favorites, Hogak on top. No really good reason to put that in your hand. Why not just pitch him straight into the graveyard and delve or convoke him a couple turns later? An 8/8 trample threat is pretty solid. Or maybe you spotted Narcomoeba. You get a free flyer if you happen to pitch that to your graveyard. I'd say go nuts. Or maybe you like what's on top and you want to keep it. You could use Sensei's Divining Top to draw it, put Sensei's Top on top, and just go about your turn. Or you do want to draw it but also dig a little bit. Cast yourself a Brainstorm. Draw that top card and a couple extra, and maybe even set your library for another Surveil. Moving on. Let's look at some stuff that you shouldn't do. There are not many non-bows with Surveil, but I definitely wouldn't recommend playing something like Sinister Sabotage and Rest in Peace or Dryad Militant in the same deck. Going to Surveil, throwing something into your graveyard, and then losing it to exile because it happened to be, Rest in Peace is in play and it's gone now, or Dryad Militant's in play and you decided to put your Faithless Looting in the graveyard, would kind of suck to lose those forever. In those situations, I would instead recommend a card with Scry. That way you can keep what's on top. Something like Preordain. Moving on, though, I would like to discuss the context of cube for this keyword. Now, in my opinion, Surveil is a support mechanic. This means that while the mechanic could be built around granting the low density of Surveil effects available, it does more when it isn't the main focus of your deck. I would recommend using it to support specific archetypes in your cube, like Reanimator or Control. decks that kind of want, flexibility and function from their cards. Surveil letting you pitch stuff allows you to reanimate stuff, or, again, a card like Sinister Sabotage gives you that power of control. You can counter something and control the next draw. I'd say that's pretty solid. Cards I would recommend, if it weren't obvious at this point, is one like Sinister Sabotage. A counter spell with upside is pretty good. Or maybe Doom Whisperer. Excellent for a late top end in the black deck. In a more fair environment, I wouldn't suggest this in powered cubes. Being able to play him on turn 5, swing around, pay some life to surveil and move more stuff into your graveyard, not a bad idea. Especially if you happen to be supporting all kinds of graveyard shenanigans. Or maybe you want to support both blue-white flyers and some other graveyard themes. I would totally suggest a card like Nightveil Sprite. A flyer that attacks to surveil. Works great in the flyers deck, and any surveilling shenanigans that you pull off can help any graveyard shenanigans you happen to be running. Just a little way to kind of mix and match things and give you that cross-contamination to help your decks flourish. Anyway, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. Leave any suggestions for the next keyword in the comments, and you have an excellent day.